So I'm going to call the Senate Transportation Committee hearing to order. The purpose of the hearing is to collect testimony from PennDOT on their 2020-21 highway and bridge budget issues. We passed our budget last week. The $600 million last minute request for the bonding was not in it. It was kind of late. It was really late. 2 weeks before you say you're out of money, you say you're out of money. So we have to get to the bottom of how that happened. So this hearing is part of our oversight responsibility into exactly what happened, and specifically when the administration first knew about it and why we weren't told sooner. I want to thank the committee members for participating today, and we also invited Representative Hennessy and Representative Carroll, the chairman from the House Transportation Committee, to join us as well. Some reminders for today's hearing: everyone is muted until you're called on to speak. Members will be unmuted by the chamber during your questions and will remain unmuted for the duration of the answer. In an effort to get as many questions as possible, with the exception of the chairs, members will be limited to one question at a time, and we will have as many rounds of questions as we can fit into the time allotment. Please contact committee staff to participate in each round of questions or if you have any technical issues. I want to introduce our three panelists from PennDOT. Our Secretary of Transportation, Yasmin Gramian. Melissa Batula is the Deputy Secretary for Highway Administration, and Chuck Zimmerman is the Director of Fiscal Management. Can all the testifiers please raise your right hand to be sworn? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please swear or affirm.
I do.
Okay, there's one. We also have Melissa Batula and Chuck Zimmerman. Are they here?
Yes.
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Okay, thank you. So we will now turn to PennDOT to provide brief remarks, and when you're finished, we'll move into the Q&A portion. If a member has a question, again, please notify the committee staff. I think you've all received a text from Nolan, the thread that we use. Would you like to begin, Secretary?
Please, thank you very much, Senator Ward. Members of the Transportation Committee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss this urgent situation. As we have shared in many public forums throughout the state, and as I and my predecessors have testified to in budget hearings and in this committee, Pennsylvania's transportation funding is in a state of emergency. In addition to the impacts from long declining gas tax revenues and ongoing lack of meaningful federal investment, PennDOT faces irrevocable losses due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, I will recap the pandemic's effects on our business and the many steps we took trying to avoid the situation we're faced with today. As detailed in my testimony to this body on May 12th, early estimates projected that we could lose between $800 to $900 million through this fiscal year as a result of reduced travel due to the pandemic. We now estimate a loss of $500 to $600 million. We've already lost nearly $400 million that we will not recover. Thankfully, traffic volumes are coming back, but not at the pre-pandemic levels, and regardless, that revenue is gone for good. We've been sounding the alarm on this issue for many months. We made our situation known to Congress, both through the AASHTO officials in early April and in our own letter to Pennsylvania congressional delegation in May. We were hopeful that considering the impacts not only to Pennsylvania, but to all 50 states, the federal government would provide relief. Also, it's important to note that every state's transportation programs have been affected by the pandemic. In response, many states have increased their state gas tax. California, New Jersey, and Virginia are recent examples. Many states have, like us, reduced the size of their programs. Other states, like New Mexico, Minnesota, and Oklahoma, turned to bonding and used other financial tools to mitigate the revenue losses. And unfortunately, as you're aware, federal infrastructure relief has not come. Without federal help, And now with the impact of the COVID crisis, we've been forced to make many, many difficult decisions. Even before COVID-19, we had reduced our 2020 program to $2.2 billion, compared to a high of $2.5 billion in 2015. We have shifted funds away from local projects to support the interstates. And because of COVID-19, we reduced the construction program by an additional $300 million. We have taken an extremely fiscally conservative approach towards all initiatives and processes. As such, in late spring, we withdrew advertisement for 19 resurfacing projects, canceled 7 contracts that had not yet been executed to ensure we have the funding needed for the basic maintenance functions. We were forced to adjust our maintenance efforts, focusing on lower cost preservation activities, some cases scaling back operations. However, some areas simply cannot be trimmed. Our staffing levels and budgets for winter maintenance must be enough to keep our roads safe and passable in the coming months. But even with these efforts, in order to completely offset the drastic predictions of revenue shortfall in the motor license fund due to COVID-19, we would have had to reduce the total construction program to $1.3 billion or less for 2020, and to stop work on active design projects to cover all existing contracts. Such a drastic reduction in construction dollars would have been devastating to the construction-related industries in Pennsylvania. Larger companies would have been forced to seek work outside of Pennsylvania. Smaller firms would face even greater challenges because they generally would not have the resources needed to seek work outside of the state. Pennsylvania workers would be affected similarly and face unemployment or would seek work in other states. Pennsylvania's economic state would be worse than it is today. Our infrastructure would be in far worse condition as a result, all on the backs of the people of Pennsylvania. This was all explained in my testimony in budget and confirmation hearings and in many public venues, from planning partner meetings to State Transportation Commission, Transportation Advisory Committee, and in all the media interviews. And frankly, we fielded many concerns from legislators' offices over the couple dozen projects that were removed from the program. We're now about to be forced to suspend hundreds. We have done everything we could on our own to avert this situation, which is why we asked for authority to bond and submitted our request through the normal budget process. Without the ability to borrow, we will be forced to suspend nearly our entire design and construction program. There is not enough revenue in cash to pay our contract bills. Our construction program has $7 billion to $8 billion in active projects at any point in time, as many of our projects are multi-year construction with multi-year cash flow. To put the size of our program in perspective, as of November 16, we had 550 payments totaling $147 million due in construction, 488 consultant payments, a total of $18.5 million in our accounts payable, based on a net 30-day period. All told, there are $165 million of current expenditures yet to be paid at this moment, and work is still going on. We are part of the large economic engine that is the transportation industry. We have an additional 51 projects at roughly $300 million that we intended to bid in December. These projects are currently in jeopardy, will need to be postponed without the availability of relief funds. That would mean our construction program would only be $1.6 billion this year, or a total of a $600 million reduction this year. Due to the multi-year nature of our construction program, reducing the program by $600 million does not solve the current funding challenges. We've already cut back $300 million. Even if we were to cut another 300 million worth of projects, the problem isn't solved. Cash flow is the issue. PennDOT does not have the legal ability to shift money from any other internal fund to address our cash flow issue without defining a means to repay the source of the draw. Additionally, our program must be able to use federal funding streams. Most federally funded projects require state dollars in cash to pay our contractors, and then we are reimbursed by FHWA. Without cash to pay the bills, we will not be able to receive reimbursement from FHWA. This would also jeopardize our ability to provide our state match of available federal funding for the year, thus further exacerbating our funding shortfalls. For example, PennDOT is tasked with ensuring that recipients of federal highway dollars, such as local municipalities, comply with all federally approved project management requirements. Our federally approved local project delivery process requires local municipalities to pay their contractor within 10 calendar days of receipt of a reimbursement from PennDOT. If PennDOT cannot make the reimbursement payment, it puts local municipalities in the untenable position of not paying local contractors or exhausting their own funds to pay contractors without knowing when reimbursement will come. The ramifications of shutting our program down are nearly incomprehensible, not only to PennDOT, not only to our industry partners, not only to the economy, but to the quality of life of the people of Pennsylvania, everyone who travels through our state. We're talking about thousands of people whose job could be impacted if we must take this step. The stoppage we may be forced into isn't a pause. It's a catastrophe. Through the construction season was just getting underway at the onset of the pandemic, the pause was a huge economic reduction. Thanks to our great industry partnership, we had our first critical projects restarted in just 2 weeks. We took advantage of the reduced traffic volumes where we could, and now we're mostly back on track. That did mean much more work late in the season and work that is unfinished here in late November, meaning billing is higher than typical for the fall season. Note that November billing is just hitting the books, and cash is needed now to ensure prompt payments are made to our partners. This has already been an exceptionally challenging year for our partners. They rely on our payments to timely pay their staff, as well as the vendors, suppliers, and other support services. The workforce is at stake. The economy will suffer tremendously, and when we can re-engage, we will have a much larger hole to dig out of. The system degradation will increase exponentially, and we will lose all the ground we gained from Act 89. We have not asked for the legislators to immediately fund these challenges, nor have we asked for any fee or tax increases to address this issue. We have merely asked for the authority to leverage financing tools at incredibly low interest rates to allow us to continue to meet the transportation needs of our citizens and those relying on our transportation network. In closing, as we are approaching Thanksgiving holidays in a few days, given that this pandemic has been a real dark chapter in all our lives, I'd like to ask you for helping us to not induce any more pressures on our fellow Pennsylvanians, saving jobs and our economy by approving this requested authorization. Thank you. I will now take any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Secretary. With all due respect, saying that we are short of money and we've been short of money for years is a lot different than saying, hey guys, in 2 weeks, we're out of cash and we're closing down the projects. That doesn't mesh at all. Secondly, I want to be clear on something. In May, you were saying that you were $800 to $900 million down. did you bring that number down? Now it's 500 or 600 million instead of the 800 million that was originally told to us?
Yes. That 800 to 900 million was the original estimate, which was used to create the initial fiscal year 2021 budget enactment. The 500 to 600 million is based on actual revenues, Senator, received through October of 2020, projected revenues through June of 2021. Gas tax revenues have been higher than the original projection. The exact situation is that through October of 2021, fiscal year, I should say, revenues are 380 million less than October of fiscal year 18 and 19. This is pre-COVID-19. It is expected that there will be an additional 120 to 220 million reduction from November through June of 2021. So hopefully that will explain things to you.
Okay. Well, yeah, I was just still trying to get to the point of, so we brought the numbers down from 800 to 500 or 600 million, and you already cut $300 million worth of projects, and now in 2 weeks we're out of money. So I'm going to ask one more question, then I'm going to stop and let others talk to you. But so the Turnpike has missed their payments to PennDOT, to the Fund for Public Transit. Has PennDOT been making up those payments to public transit?
Yes, PennDOT, the public transit, as of right now, they don't have any issues with their operational costs. We've been making them whole. If you remember, they got a good amount of money from the federal government under the CARES Act, which has been distributed appropriately to the public transit agencies, I should say. Act 44 money is separate from the CARES money that we receive. And as of right now, they're obligated to pay the money, they being the Pennsylvania Turnpike. We gave them the extension for 2 payments, but their plan is to make payments. They're going to the private market for bonding, I believe, in the beginning of the new year.
Okay, so they haven't made 2 of the payments, totaling about 228 million?
Correct.
So you have not been taking money then from a different line in PennDOT and sending it to mass transit?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So is any of the requested 600 million going to be used to transfer Act 44 payments?
There is no transfer of 600 million to Act 44.
No,
it's
I didn't
purely
say
for
this.
highways, bridges.
Okay. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Senator Sabatina.
I don't have any questions. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Okay. Representative Hennessy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thanks for the invitation to join in this meeting. The Madam Secretary, I hear you saying that you felt the transportation made it clear that they were losing money. Frankly, every agency in the state made it clear that they were losing money because of the coronavirus. I mean, to go through the months of the coronavirus shutdown or slowdown and not ask for the authority to bond is almost staggering. And it seems to me that clear that someone dropped the ball within PennDOT. When I heard about it last Monday or Tuesday, I guess Tuesday, we spoke maybe Thursday, trying to figure out how this might have happened. And the only answer that you could give me was that, well, we've been telling you for months that we're going to be losing money. That is something totally different than asking for authority from the legislature to borrow such a vast amount of money, $600 million. As near as I've been able to trace it, the first that our leadership in the House learned about it was when LRB drafted a bill last Tuesday, the 17th, saying that you were asking for the authority to borrow $600 million. How did this happen? You have budget departments. It seems to me almost incomprehensible that nobody blew the whistle and said, we're going to need this money and we need it drastically, and for the House to hear about it 3 days before a budget was scheduled to be adopted, frankly, just indicates to me that somebody seriously dropped the ball.
Well, I'm sorry you feel this way, Chair Hennessy, but we took a lot of actions actually to manage our program to the revenue that we were receiving. And the actions we took included cutting the construction projects. We reduced our construction projects by $300 million. We lost.
Yes, I heard your testimony. I'm just asking, is it that you waited until so late in the process to come in and say, oh, and by the way, there's this little item of $600 million we'd like you to authorize our borrowing for?
Well, they were, as I said,
and I'm not asking you to name names, but just I think somebody's got to acknowledge that people were sleeping at the switch, and it shouldn't have happened. We shouldn't be in this dire strait.
Again, as I said, we took every action that was possible, from managing our program, reduction in our program, revamping our maintenance operations, flexing money from one bucket to another to be able to pay the bills. And Chuck can talk about some of the financial actions that we took to be able to carry on with the program. We were also counting on the federal government to come in with some relief funds.
Well,
and that was, we were hoping on that. And if you remember back in July, August, when AASHTO sent an email out about the $3,700 billion of backdrop money. And then there were some further discussions on the Congressional Invest Act that was going to allocate another $32 billion. It never got passed, but there were a lot of discussions on the federal side. So there was always a hope that we would see something. And we did take some actions to be able to keep up with the funding situation that we had. I'm not saying bonding was a new item to us. We always thought, as a last resort, if we don't get any money from the feds, if nothing comes true, we may have to consider it. It never became official, but it was among the list of items that we considered, sir.
I understand that, but some of these items were taking place months and months ago. Draft language for an authorization for $600 million worth of bonds was not created until last Tuesday, which is extremely late in the process, and has led us to this very difficult situation.
Well, we had the call with the 4 transportation EDs on the 10th of November. On holiday, we tried to make some more calls with the appropriation EDs. On the 12th, Sarah Clark actually had further conversations with many, many more EDs. On the 13th, Friday the 13th, I had conversations with the EDs on the leadership side as well as on the transportation side. So there were a lot of discussions prior to getting us to the language for the budget. We actually saw the first draft of the fiscal code that was circulated, and the language was included. That was on the 17th. So obviously they were aware of it.
But we're talking the time frame from November 10th to the time the budget gets passed in November 20th. It's just hard for me to understand why you can't say that somebody at PennDOT should have started talking about this well before November 10th. It just boggles the mind when you know that this is a legislative process and it takes time to wait until and cite a call on November 13th or November 10th, and whatever. Have you investigated with the treasurer the powers that exist under Act 479 of 61, which was sent to you by the House leadership back on November 20th?
This is the letter you're referring to, the letter that came in last Friday?
Yes, November 20th.
Yes. Well, this letter and this investigation is not with us, is with the Office of Budget. They're looking into it. It's my understanding that other revenues are not available. Chuck, do you have anything to add to that?
Just, what we have done, I think the general fund balance was 1.5 billion last week. And I just know that we have advanced our transfers from the motor license fund to the general fund for the state police. We do that early for the last several years. That originally was set up as a monthly schedule. But I noted cash flow needs in the general fund, we've done that early. And right now that advancement is about 350 million. So, and I certainly don't know the general fund or, the treasurer's perspective. I just know things are tight there also.
Within PennDOT, you must have a budgetary office and budget analysts. Can you tell me whether they ever indicated to you that PennDOT was operating basically on a 2-week balance in their checkbook? You tell us on November 20th that you're going to shut down projects on November 30th. That just seems to me extremely close budgeting, and somebody must have been aware of that.
We were aware of our financial situation, and Chuck is the gentleman who actually reviews the budget on a daily basis, not on a weekly basis, and he gives us an understanding on where we are with the budget. We knew about the situation, how dire it is, and we were trying to flex money from one bucket to another to keep up with the payment. But it got to a point that we realized we're not going to be able to carry on with our program without borrowing. And that's when we actually reached out through the proper channels and informed the powers that we need to look into alternatives. And the only alternative that we see right now is to bond and to borrow. And we went through the proper channels. We informed the EDs, we notified them, we provided them with the language. I understand you're saying the notice that was given wasn't advanced enough. It should have been given sooner. We were under this impression that we are following the proper channels here, the proper protocols of communications here.
The problem is not with which channels you followed, it's just the timing. To wait until mid-November to ask for the authority to borrow $600 million, or we shut down on December 1st, is frankly one of the most egregious cases of brinksmanship that I can imagine, I can ever recall. So I don't think it was intentional. I think it was inadvertent. Somebody was sleeping at the switch, and that's led us to this situation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Senator Gordner.
Thank you, Chairman Ward. Thinking of Chairman Hennessy and I have been around the House and the Senate since 1993. I'm going to pile on a little bit, but I come from the perspective having supported previous transportation funding initiatives. There was one during the Ridge years in which Secretary of Transportation Brad Mallory traveled the state for almost a year. I still remember the example that he would give with the fork. He'd take the fork and he'd bend it this way and that way and talk about the freeze thaw that Pennsylvania roads go through. But he went to any chamber, rotary, any sort of event that he could get to in order to build the case, in that instance, to do some additional transportation funding, which I supported. I remember Secretary Barry Shoke during the Corbett years, and Corbett, in my opinion, made a bad decision in signing a no tax pledge. But Secretary Shoke, once again, for about a year, traveled around the state. He came to at least 3 different spots in my senatorial district, arguing why it was important to do some additional transportation funding and why it was important to invest in infrastructure. And ultimately, despite what Corbett had signed with the support of Governor Rendell, Governor Corbett, previous chairs, all 4 caucus chairs, we did another substantial transportation funding project at that time. I heard what you said back in February and March. I know with COVID, you can't physically travel the state to make the case. But I know all of my chambers still were meeting virtually on at least a monthly basis, if not several times during the month. I know the Philly Chamber has events every week. I've participated in several of them. We actually, our largest chamber has a monthly transportation committee meeting in which we always get updates on the CSVT, and I thank you for your continued support of that. But I'm also going to make the case that it would have been helpful over the last 3, 4, 5 months, frankly, Madam Secretary, for you to be participating in chambers or other public events that you can do virtually in order to state the case, in order to build up the support that even at the last moment, we could have got broad support in the House and Senate to do it. In the past, infrastructure investment has been a bipartisan issue. Again, under Governor Corbett, all 4 caucus chairs were there in the rotunda with Governor Corbett and Governor Rendell in order to get that done. It can be done, but oftentimes you need to build the support. You need to build the buzz out in our districts. You need to reach out to the chambers and those other type of organizations to get their support as well, so that when you make that pitch, you've built up the support for it. I do not believe you did that. I participated, being on the ballot, I participated in a lot of chamber virtual meetings over the last 3, 4, 5 months, and nor your office participated to make that argument. And again, with the biggest chamber that I have having a monthly transportation committee meeting in which PennDOT participates, and I thank them for that, every single month, there was not one mention that it was necessary to do bonding. Do you have a response to that?
Okay, thank you, Senator. We must be missing each other, because I did participate in Philadelphia Chamber. I did participate in Harrisburg Chamber. I was on a couple radio station interviews. I attended WTS conference. I attended APC. I attended ACEC. I attended ASH Harrisburg. I attended a Women Transportation Seminar. I attended Traffic 21, Mobility 21, UTC. I attended Philadelphia BPHL Innovation Festival and talked about that. I attended Delaware County TMA. I attended Bucks County TMA. And sir, I can go on, and I'll be happy to share my calendar with you. And I apologize if we missed each other, but every opportunity that I had, I did talk about the funding situation. I did not specifically bring out the bond because we were not sure if we were going to do that. I wasn't sure if that was even an option at the time to consider, but I did mention to them where we are with our funding situation. I did mention to them where we are with our program, the cuts we had to make, the stress that we had to go to as a Department of Transportation to address the COVID situation. And I shared all that information in any event that I had.
All right. If you could, within the next 24 hours, just share where in Senator Ward's district and my district you personally participated and made that argument and made that pitch. If you could do that, Senator Ward, Chairman Ward, and I would appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Carroll.
Thank you, Chairwoman Ward, and thank you for calling this hearing today. It's critically important that we have this conversation for all sorts of reasons, so I appreciate your leadership here. In my research with the House Democratic Appropriations staff, it was crystal clear to our folks that the motor license fund revenues were declining precipitously over the past few months, and that some remedy would have to be provided to solve this problem. Granted, there was never a direct conversation prior to the beginning of November related to bonding, but it was crystal clear, at least to our folks, that there was going to be a multi-million-dollar problem. And the other observation I would offer is that the very construct of the budget that the Commonwealth approved that took us through November 30th was a budget for our general fund that was hopeful of federal action, that there'd be another CARES bill that would be enacted by the Congress and signed by the president that would provide some relief to the states, and included in that relief would be transportation funding relief, and sadly that has not occurred. And so we get to November, and the only option left for all components of the budget, including transportation, was the enactment of the final 7-month piece of the puzzle. And so when the conversation of bonding started sometime around November the 9th or 10th, it wasn't a giant surprise to me in terms of the need for a fix. The bonding was unique, and in terms of hearing about it for the first time. But the reality is that we have a giant problem on our hands that will materialize in a week and a day. And as much as I appreciate the desire to have an analysis of how we got to this point, I really am hopeful that there can be leadership exhibited by all 4 caucuses that would result in the passage of a second fiscal code bill with one component included, and that is this bonding request from PennDOT. I'm hopeful that the Senate would consider, a fiscal code bill, a House bill that could be sent over for a concurrence vote that would avert this problem prior to December 1st. And then we can continue to dissect the missteps related to a conversation about bonding. But Madam Chair, I'm going to look forward as much as backward here and hope that we can prevent a complete shutdown of our transportation program on December the 1st. That would be a catastrophic problem for all sorts of folks that rely on a paycheck related to our program. And after we have a chance to solve that and provide a legislative remedy, then we can continue to the analysis relative to what happened here. But from my perspective here in northeastern Pennsylvania, I cannot imagine a scenario where we have hundreds and hundreds of projects shut down and the collateral damage that comes from that. I'm hopeful that, Madam Chair, you and the rest of the folks on this call will provide the leadership, and I'm happy to join in that will get us to a solution concurrent with the effort to analyze what happened here.
Thank you, Representative Carroll. Senator Bartolotta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary, I have a question about, I know that we're going to be having to delay all of these projects that were supposed to be starting December 1 and on. There's always been an issue with subcontracted projects that somehow get delayed because of the PennDOT end of things. And when I first took office in 2015, there was about $18 million in, I think, what is it called, overages, or some additional costs that PennDOT would bear because of projects that were delayed, whether a utility hadn't gotten there on time to move a pole, a wire, or any of those things. What, if any, what is the number that we are facing to pay these subcontractors now with all of these costs that we will incur by delaying their projects at such a late date? Because they have reserved their teams, their products, their tool, all of their projects are now on the boards for them to get busy and get to work. What are we looking at with fines, penalties, overages, contracts that are now broken? What is that figure that we're looking at?
Actually, we're looking into those numbers right now, ma'am. We're looking into, we still need to evaluate the contracts and figure out which contracts are considered essential, because we wanted to make sure that we're still keeping the roadways passable and safe. Some of the contracts, we need to maintain them to get them to a point and then shut down. The impact, as you mentioned, is going to be huge. The impact from shutting down, from mobilization, demobilization, and then mobilization when they restart, it's going to be huge. The claims are going to be huge. Deputy Secretary Betula is on the call. She's actually looking into it. She's talking to the DEs. Melissa, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I agree. Actually, it is going to be catastrophic, and it's just going to exacerbate, I'll say, the already funding challenges we have. Roughly, when you look at it all across the board, it's about 63% of our construction contracts end up being federally funded. And when you know, many of those projects might be 80% federal and 20% state. When we look at those delays that you're talking about, those are going to have to be bore out of state dollars, regardless if it's a federal project or not, most likely, because of the way the rules work on the federal side. So it's going to be an expounding project or problem that's going to actually further degrade our ability to bid additional projects, you know, once we get past this period. Absolutely.
Okay, so to that point exactly, if the department knew for months that this was coming down the pike, why would you not have a number? And why would you not know exactly what projects would have to be delayed, postponed, canceled? Why would you not have those numbers at your fingertips? If this was a number crunching game on a daily basis, why would that number not be on the top of a list somewhere? These are exactly the projects we have to cancel. These are exactly the subcontractors that we're going to have to cancel. These are the contracts that are going to cost us X for delays, for a penalty, for any of that. If this was such a catastrophic event coming down the pike, you should have at your fingertips exactly how much that's going to cost the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to delay these projects. I'm confused because I jumped on maybe 9 minutes late, but I heard over and over again that the department knew long ago that this was going to take place. So I'm confused as to why those numbers are not readily available, why there isn't a list of exactly what projects are going to have to be delayed and what that's going to cost the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
So, Senator, go ahead, Melissa.
I was just going to say that I think what maybe we're missing here is that, you know, we have tried everything in our power to make sure that we're trying to keep a vibrant industry moving. If we had taken those estimates that we saw early on, so let's go look at that $800 to $900 million, and we had tried to absorb that this year. So to your point, if we had tried to do everything in our power to prevent that, that would have meant that we would have had to pretty much shut down the bidding program altogether at the very beginning of the pandemic. And doing that would have kind of decimated the entire industry. At that time, yes, that's a decision we certainly could have made. It would have been irresponsible at that point because we hadn't exhausted every single opportunity we would have to see if we could get to resolution of that problem. So whether that meant the CARES Act, we were writing letters everywhere to everybody we could to try to get additional funding for infrastructure because we recognize how big it is. We have tried everything in our power to prevent that from happening. And I'll be honest, it would have been a self-fulfilling prophecy. I could have stopped everything, or we could have stopped everything much earlier in the process, and we'd have the exact same delays we're talking about today. We have an option available to us. We brought that up during the normal budgeting period when every other agency was trying to address their funding needs. And we did that in that time frame. You know, could there have been better communication? I'm sure we can continue to discuss this, but we have been doing everything we possibly could to prevent that because to your answer, I don't have a specific on what the cost would be for every single project, but I can tell you it's going to be enormous. And we really can't project that because until we get into that, we know how long it's going to be delayed, who all would have to move on a utility project. There's really no way of knowing what exactly those ramifications are going to be until we actually see what those impacts are at the end of the day. So I wish I could tell you exactly what those impacts will be. I will tell you they are certainly significant, and they will have far-reaching consequences into the future.
I appreciate that. And I'll end with, I do appreciate the fact that you were trying to prevent any sort of delay and all those other things. But I owned a business for 31 years. You have an exit strategy. You have a contingency plan. You have plans in place in case something doesn't happen. And I think that from the pandemic, having completely shut down every single construction project across Pennsylvania and having to spend X dollars to send teams out to just shore up construction sites, not complete them, but shore them up, that was a number that was already on the books from March and April of this year. So it would lead me to believe that this department would have done well to provide for a contingency plan if these CARES dollars didn't come in by X date, if the department was not afforded a $600 million bond in the 11th hour and 59th minute before the budget was negotiated. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I just want to add, we knew in September that federal funds weren't coming. It wasn't something that happened on November the 9th. I mean, we knew in September. Next, Senator Stefano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's great to see everyone today, but not under these circumstances, and has been so typical of this year. You know, never let a crisis go unwasted. And we're in a crisis mode, and that's when mistakes are made, when we're trying to move so quickly. And I appreciate the opportunity to have this hearing so we can vet some of these ideas and thoughts out before we commit taxpayer dollars. And that's one of my biggest concerns, is I'm being asked to commit dollars that the taxpayers so hardly work so hard for, to give to the state government, or in this case, we take. And every time they fuel up, we take it. I want to make sure we're doing the right thing. Quick question. You were talking about your projections, and Senator Bartolotta mentioned it. Every business does weekly, daily, monthly cash flow projections. Do you have at your fingertips cash flow projections for the last several months that we can take a look at, and we can see where the trajectory was going? Because it would seem to me that it would be already there. We would have known long ago that the cash would have been zero by December 1. And I wanted to know if you had those available.
Chuck, do you want to take that question?
Yes, you know, we talked originally about the 800 million original plan. That's what the budget was built on. We knew that several months in, July, August, you know, the revenues were looking better. So we were expecting somewhat of that return, which we've gotten now to the 600 million. I think what really complicates this is that the work that was shut down in April, May, and June, we're now seeing doubling basically in July, August, and September, and into October. So a normal cash flow analysis we look at, yes, we know how much we, you know, historically spend every month in construction, and that number is much bigger over the last several months, which has made this problem more sudden, if you will. We've taken another major problem here is the construction appropriation started at 45 million. That is the initial cash authority in Treasury. So we've been having to move, advancing some of our Act 26 and Act 3 supplementals. We've been advancing those payments more than we would in a normal year. And I think that's just, yeah, this is not a normal year. The normal cash flow analysis has been, when we did a 95 million transfer to maintenance several weeks ago, thinking that that would get us another month. They got us 1 week. It's just because the expenditures have been so much higher compared to our normal year with that catch up in April, May, and June.
What really concerns me is we're not meeting our expenses that we thought we were going to have. We don't have the cash to cover it. So we want to borrow to fill that hole. How does that get paid back? If we can't make our payments now, what are we going to do to repay the 600 million? How do you project to do that?
And yes, to that end, you know, if we borrow 600 million, there's going to be $42 to $45 million debt service, which we'll have to pay over the next 20 years. The issue really here, we talked about, we lowered our lettings. And I think that's not really being realized. We lowered the lettings from 2.2 down to 1.9 billion this calendar year, and for calendar year 21. So that's 600 million, which, you know, at first glance, we're asking for 600 million down now in borrowing. We're down about 600 million for COVID. So we've cut our programs by 600 million. But these are multi-year projects. So we only see the benefit, or the cash reduction of that first 300 million. We'll see 43% of that in the first year. So that's only 120 million. What Melissa was saying earlier was that in order to truly make up this revenue loss back in July or August or whenever, we would have had to lower our lettings down to 1.2 billion or so, $1 billion reduction just from a cash flow standpoint to see that reduction this year. So, we keep saying we've taken a lot of steps, and we have, but from a cash flow perspective, we're not seeing the benefit of that until next year and 2 and 3 years down the road.
I just know we're on a dangerous trajectory.
But
yeah, that's all the questions I have for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Senator
you,
Scavello. Can't hear you, Senator Scavello.
Mario?
Okay. Is that Mario calling in? Mario? Okay, let's go back to Senator Scavello and let's move on to Senator Vogel, and then we'll come back to Senator Scavello. Senator Vogel. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Secretary. My question revolves around the issue that's been brought up, has been on the news the last few days. There was an article in our paper today about possibly tolling bridges in different sections of highway and things like that. And I was wondering if you had any thing more concrete, or is that just an idea that's been thrown around to try and raise revenue? I mean, obviously, I think, start trying to toll some of these bridges like in Pittsburgh and places, people are just going to try and find ways to go around the bridges versus paying a toll, truck drivers and commuters and things like that. And I was just wondering if there's any concrete information you have right now, any ideas of what you're looking at doing, or is this just an issue you're throwing out there for discussion as future ways to raise money?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Senator. It's we're looking into alternative ways of paying for our needs, and specifically on the bridge side. We completed our asset management plan a couple of years ago. We shifted dollars into our interstate system. The spending, as you know, and we talked about this, on our national highway system went down, our state highway system went down. This funding situation, of course, got worse during the COVID-19, pandemic. But prior to that, we were still faced with a lot of issues and challenges with the funding that we had and how to pay for it. And, this is just an alternative way of looking at additional funding sources that are available to pay for our bridge programs. It's going to be very specific to very few bridge projects, and these are major bridge structures throughout the state. As you know, they could be the most expensive part of any project. And we are thinking of, creating a partnership with the private industry to use our P3 opportunities, P3 program to construct, design, build, operate, maintain, and finance some of these major structures throughout the state. So that's what it is, Senator.
Okay.
Okay, so basically you're saying I'm getting out of this is you're going to toll a bridge and specifically use the money from the tolls to fix that bridge?
Correct.
Or is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
So if we toll bridges in Pittsburgh, they're not going to be spent in Harrisburg or Erie or someplace fixing something there. If you toll bridges in Pittsburgh, money's going to be spent in Pittsburgh or the Pittsburgh area to upgrade bridges that need replaced or whatever here in the Pittsburgh area.
Absolutely. The money will stay on that structure that's being tolled.
Okay, thank you very much. That clears up my question for now. Yeah, thank you very much. There was a lot of issues and a lot of uncertainty and concern when it was brought up the other day. It was on the news the other night, and it was also in the paper today, and it still wasn't very clear about how it was going to be, but that's good to know. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
No problem. And I can set up another call separately, Senator, to talk to you about this program. We can give you more specifics on what we've done and how we're going about it and where we are on the documents that we're preparing, and also the communications plan and everything. We'll be happy to do that.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I look forward to setting up a meeting here in the future sometime and do that. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks.
Senator Scavello.
I think I'm fine now. I had to move to another. Everything was good. I think I have a little bit more here on this one. Okay. I have to tell you, I have an office on 611 when normally there's between 25 and 28,000 vehicles a day. And for 3 months, I might have seen about 1,500 cars a day. We had construction project that was delayed for two and a half months out there. We have a problem. And I can tell you that I called about 12 gasoline stations, the bigger guys, and they're down between 30 and 35% in revenue because of the pandemic when everything was shut down. People weren't going to work. And in my particular case, and I think in any tourist area, on any given weekend, we have 50,000 people that come into our county. Between the 3 indoor water parks, and in the summer, it's at the outdoor park, about 50,000 a week, Plus, we have 2 races, and this year would have been 1, but it would have been a whole weekend that bring about another 100,000 on top of all of that. So Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, those are all tourist areas. They got murdered. So it's not just the hotel, it's the car, the gasoline that gets them to those hotels. I'm sure, Kim, you heard me in the Appropriations Committee saying it's going to be the shortfall for us. And I'm saying it when everybody was saying 2 million. It's going to be between 4.5 and 5 billion. And I hit that right on the nose. And I've also, I do a lot of Facebook. I've met FaceTime and I've Facebook stuff. And I've mentioned that as well. I just, you're right. We should have been a little bit more prepared. But I got to tell you, this problem's not going away and we have to address it. If they cancel projects, I don't know what the numbers are, but I know they're going to be huge. You sign contracts with people to start, and now you're backing off that contract. It's going to be costly, probably more costly than borrowing the money and the payback, the interest payback. So we really got to be smart about this, and we've got to try to get this done because. And if we can't do it by December 1st, but we're willing to do it and give a commitment that we will, the first thing we do in January. But we have to do something. Because I know that we were hit hard, and I see it here in my county. My resorts, they get about one resort's over 20 million in sales tax. That number this year will be in half. 20 million in sales tax to the Commonwealth. We're going to have about 10 million from that one resort. And the others are in half as well because people weren't traveling and we weren't getting, and it's the same, it's a victim of COVID-19. And what I'm hopeful for, that we don't have it as bad this coming year, because you know why? We could be facing this again. I don't want to even think about it, but we could be facing this again. That's
Thank you.
my preaching, whatever, but thank you. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you, Senator Scavallo. You know, we were talking about many things here, but I want to go back to this late request. It just feels like it was intentional to hold us over a barrel, knowing that if it didn't get into the budget, that thousands and tens of thousands of jobs, folks would be getting laid off. And that's just no way to do business. You know, you knew you didn't have federal money at the end of September, and it just feels like we're being leveraged. And really, none of us want to see projects stopped in our districts, and none of us want to see anybody be laid off or lose their job. The only people or person who should lose their job is the person who did not either bring this information forward in a timely manner so that we could deal with it. You know how sensitive it is in the legislature to borrow. We know this, it's sensitive. I mean, you could have done this in October and given us time to deal with it to ensure that nobody lost their job and none of these projects were shut down. And that is where I sit here with this hearing. It is where I feel it's the biggest problem right now for me. And nobody wants this, and I hope we can find a way to deal with it. I mean, this is a cash flow issue for you, correct? So what's going to happen when this runs out in June? You're going to borrow money for cash flow. It just doesn't seem like it is the way that we should be doing business. Senator Gordner.
Thank you, Chairman Ward. Madam Secretary, I'm going to try to take a little different approach and actually follow up on what the chair lady was just mentioning. I've been the author of two different bonding bills. One in now the scheme of things was a smaller one. It was a $200 million bond for sewer and water projects. It was a one-time fix, and we did $200 million worth of sewer and water projects that were needed around the state. And that money was used for grants for those type of projects. But back in 2011, 12, I was author of the largest bond, I think, in our Commonwealth history. We owed $2.5 billion to the federal unemployment comp system at that time. We were paying a 3+ interest rate on that $2.5 billion. So I authored legislation that allowed for a bond that ended up being about $2.5 billion. We got it, I think, at 1.39% interest, which was outstanding. We certainly have incredibly low rates that we could do bonding right now. But as part of that 2011-2012 bond, it was a one-time bonding. It was to pay off a debt, which would be a one-time type of thing. And then we, over 9 years, had a source of funding to pay it back, which we did. It is fully paid back and no longer owing. So the concern with what PennDOT has proposed is a $600 million bond, which we could get at great rates right now. There's no doubt about that, but it is for cash flow. So I think that's what the big red flag that popped up last week was. It still would have been a challenge at that last moment to get it for a one-time expense, but if we could have got our heads around it, it's possible. But how could we possibly do a $600 million bond for a cash flow issue? How can you make the argument to the General Assembly that that's prudent to do?
Okay. Senator Gortner, I am not an expert on financing. You are. You've done it a couple times. All I know is, if I want to simplify, we need this money to pay for our infrastructure. We overestimated. I mean, we did not overestimate. When we got into the budget this year, back in February, and we started putting our numbers together, we looked at our program. And our program is not annually, it's over a period of time. We let the construction projects are being done in multiple years, right? So when we put it into the program, our program actually goes over multiple years. And based on the program and the commitments we had to the program, we had to come up with a budget, and we spend our money accordingly. Then we hit the COVID situation, and the revenue started going down. The revenue wasn't coming in. Now, the thing I can tell you is this money that we need, it's no different than getting a line of credit to spend the money on your roof or to spend the money on fixing something in your house. We don't want it to expand our business. We don't want it to put an extension to our house. We wanted to put something into this infrastructure that we have, which we have committed to. And by the way, we have a protected source of revenue, which is motor license fund. We get in about $800 billion a year. We spend about $800 billion a year. Now, the revenue went down a little bit. It was totally unexpected. And hopefully it would never happen again. And this is really the first time in the history of PennDOT that we are in a situation that, you know, our cash flow is not matching our program. And it's purely because of this unprecedented situation. So we wanted a relief for $42 million a year, and we can pay that. It's no different from line of credit. Use it as much as you need, put it into the program, take it off of our balance sheet, which is the construction letting, you know, $42 million, but we can actually keep the projects active and moving forward. That's all we are asking for.
So are you, and Pat Brown's not a part of this committee, or is he a part of the committee? I don't recall. Pat's are good in regard to like anticipation notes, counties, and actually the state from time to time until, let me use the school district. The school district has a certain time of year when they send out their school bill and they get all this money, and then, you know, come the spring or something like that, until they get the next round of money in, their cash flow may be bad. So sometimes they have to do, I think it's a tax anticipation note. I think it maybe is what the terminology is. It's a one-time type of thing, once a year type of thing, but they know that in another month or so they're going to get the money in. Are you saying, and whether it's you or Chuck, are you saying that this is a one-time ask? It's a one-time ask. So if everything else, and I'll be glad to have Chuck weigh in, but if everything else is even, a year from now, you're not going to need another ask because it's a
no, sir.
So
no, sir.
There's a couple things here. Yes, we're saying cash because Treasury is insufficient in cash, can't make payments, but it's really a budgetary thing. I mean, with the $600 million reduction in revenues we're talking about, our construction appropriation, which we had to make $45 million in order to meet all the accounting, the internal payroll, things like that. It really could have been zero, but we need some money in there to funnel through. So we also have reduction. That would have been 200 million or so without COVID. So there's 155 million budgetary, which impacts cash reduction. Our Act 26 supplemental, which is a portion of the gas tax that's directed to construction, maintenance, all the different accounts, that is also lowered. It is all based on the COVID revenue impact. The last I've seen, the projections for 21-22, which are done, the Commonwealth uses Global Insight. It's a international economic forecast. You know, they're projecting that this gets better. You know, we get back to normal revenues in 21-22. Now, who knows? You know, if this doesn't go well and it gets extended, no one knows that. But based on those forecasts, yes, we're expecting revenues to come back next year, and we will not need this. It's truly for this year. in addition to that, we keep talking about the multi-year projects. In 21-22, we would be better able to handle this because we've lowered lettings down to 1.9 this calendar year and next year. But again, you know, in order to have the cash or make up the budget this year, right now, we would have needed to lower lettings in early 2019. So yes, this is most definitely a one-time thing pending some other sort of disaster, you know, but we can't predict that. But assuming things come back.
We do know as a result of the act that we passed a number of years ago, I think we're about 2 years away from the Turnpike Commission to stop making or to lower the payments that's coming into PennDOT. So you're not factoring that in.
No, that's not part of it. Act 44 is separate from what we are asking for. The $600 million that we're asking for is purely for construction lettings.
In the motor license fund, the Act 44
in the motor license fund.
Public Transportation Trust Fund, two completely different funds, yes.
Madam Secretary, Madam Chair, if I could just do one follow-up, if you don't mind. In what you asked the Appropriations Committee, you looked at a 20-year bond as compared to a 10-year bond. Is there a reason for that? Because of you wanted to keep the payments to 42 million to 50? 20-year bond for a one-time cash infusion is concerning.
That was just whether it's 10-year, 20-year, you know, we don't have a preference there. And if there's a better rate or a better way to do it, that's just how historically we've done our bonding. So that's what we use to come up with the 42 million estimate for debt service. If there's a better way or a lower rate, certainly that was just mentioned. But we wouldn't actually do PennDOT does not actually do the borrowing, so we're not the experts on that.
Okay, and I've got to ask one last question. It's a short one, but I'll remind the Secretary that she's under oath, and if she doesn't want to answer it, I fully understand. Were you asked by the governor's office to postpone the announcement of this until after the November elections?
We did not have any discussions on specific timing, sir. The governor's office knew that bonding was one of the items we were considering. It was discussed. We were also talking about some of these other options that we exercised, specifically to postpone for after election, and then we will bring it up, or it was not discussed to that details, no.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, Tim Hennessy, could I ask you a question?
Sure, whoever that is.
Tim Hennessy.
Okay.
Madam Secretary, I think I just heard you say the governor's office knew you were going to need borrowing. Now, when did the governor's office know that? Before November 10th?
The governor's office, sir, we had a discussion with the governor's office. We went to the governor's office and we shared with them a list of solutions. And this was back in August and September. That's when we proposed some ideas on how to address this shortfall in our cash flow. And there were a number of solutions back then. And bonding was among one of them. And I personally was having some discussions with my colleagues and my peers, other places, other states, on what other states are doing to address their cash flow. That's where we brought in all these discussions to the governor's office. We did not specifically focus on the bonding at the time or any other solution. We were just explaining to the governor's office how some of the other states are addressing this situation of cash flow.
Okay, the problem that I see is that you were talking to the governor's office in August and September. We didn't get any request at the legislature until this LRB draft last Tuesday, on the 17th of November, knowing we were trying to wrap up a budget, Whatever. Let me ask you one other question. How hard and fast is the December 1st deadline? I mean, why not December 13th? Why not January 14th? Why not February 15th? Where's the magic? Where do you actually run out of money and start bouncing checks?
Okay, sir, I can have Chuck answer this question, but what I can tell you, if we have the assurance that there is going to be some money, some kind of a borrowing, some backup money coming to the state, then we can we can carry on with our program. This is my understanding based on the conversation I have with my fiscal person and with my deputy secretary for a highway admin. We need some kind of an assurance that there is going to be revenue coming in. And Chuck, can you explain how that works? Based on the assurance that the revenue is coming in, how can we continue with our program?
Sure. And, you ask about the December 1st date. That is just based on the availability of cash in Treasury. There's nothing there. We've been doing many steps. The last one we did was November 2nd or 3rd. We transferred $95.1 million of expenditures from construction to maintenance, knowing that the December 1st enactment would have had a higher construction appropriation. And it did go up, I believe, to $170 million. So we're going to use that to pay back maintenance. What I'm saying is we've already done, numerous steps just to keep cash in to make it as long as we could. We are now at the point, and we're saying December 1st because honestly, after that, I don't know if we're going to be able to make all the payments. There's still a lot of things, invoices will be coming in. So that's why we picked the December 1st date, or saying that it's just we're out of cash. And yes, to that point where we transferred money to maintenance, if we absolutely know for sure that, we're going to have a replacement here, there are other things we can do, but they have to be paid back also. So the extreme risk here is if there's not a further action, something doesn't happen in the future, we will have no way to pay that back. And that gets into many other complications.
That's a reputation I don't think PennDOT nor the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania can afford to have.
Right.
You're asking me to predict what votes will be garnered in the House or the Senate. I don't know that I'm in a position to do that. I can assure you that we will try as soon as we can convince ourselves that this was not, that we actually have definite numbers. Then we know what we should be going out trying to borrow or authorize PennDOT to borrow. I think everybody's committed that it will work toward that, but predicting is not a specialty of mine. We need some hard numbers though. Is when PennDOT runs out of money, whether it's this month or no, whether it's December, or January, or February, and we can buy ourselves some time to to pursue authorization legislatively. But
Chuck, can you answer that?
Time.
I'm sorry, sir. Chuck, can you answer that question now? Because we've looked into this so many times.
I don't know what the Treasury balance is today, but if it's not zero and payments are not being held up yet, they will be within a week, just based on, you talked about cash flow earlier and what we've been spending on a normal week, a normal month. And again, that's higher because we're catching up from April, May, and June. But that Treasury cash balance, which is why we're calling it a cash flow issue, is zero or will be zero within days. I don't have that now, but we can easily get that. And, based on that, that's why we're saying December 1st.
What about the authorization or the suggestion made in the November 20th letter from House leadership saying to go to Act 479 of 1961? Is that an option that's available to you?
And again, being PennDOT, I can't speak to that. If there is a solution that gives us $600 million, that's only a temporary thing. Again, we would have to pay that back. So without another solution, but that temporarily, yes, but without a way to pay it back, that's the risk.
Has anybody, Madam Secretary, has anybody gone to the treasurer to ask whether or not there's money available for that?
We have gone to the governor's office, to the budget office. We haven't gone to the treasury. I don't know if we can, honestly, this is new to me. I don't know if you can have direct conversation with treasury to see if you can lend us some money. I am not familiar if that process is in place. Typically, we go through the channels to see what's going on. Yes, and they have been looking into it after they received the letter. We don't have the answer.
Okay. Well, please let us know as soon as you do get an answer.
I want to follow
Thank
up, Mr. Zimmerman. How do we know, to what you were talking about, the 600 million will all be used for heavy highway projects and not flexed for other things? What kind of assurances do we have there, Secretary? Anybody?
Do you want me to?
Yes,
Yeah.
Chuck, please go ahead.
Yes. Well, I've heard a couple times, about the concern with Act 44. And again, that's the Public Transportation Trust Fund. That's a completely separate fund. If this, what would happen is we get the borrowing for the 600 million, they would be deposited through augmentations into the motor license fund, specifically the highway construction appropriation, possibly bridge also. But the 10581 appropriation is where all that spending authority would come from, and that's where the revenue from the bonds would go into. So, it all within the motor license fund, within the 10581 appropriation.
Thank you. Representative Carroll, do you have a question?
Madam Chair, just to offer that Senator Gordner's leadership on the bonding to repay the federal government a few years ago was a horrible solution that I voted for, because there was no other better solution. And I think that what we face today is a similar horrible solution, but there's no other better solution. And so just as I voted for that bond issue, $2 billion or so, as I recall, this is the best solution. And I just fear what happens if we choose to wait. The future General Assembly gets sworn in January. By then, these projects will be shut down. And so I'm going to hold out hope that we can find the unique will to go ahead and do one other bill this session before November 30th to solve this problem, and lean on the leadership of the folks involved in this and others to get it done. And I'm hopeful that we can all be a part of that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. We don't have any further questions here from anyone.
Kim, Senator Sabatina,
Oh, okay.
how are you?
I'm okay.
All right, good. I just want to echo the sentiments. I think the important thing gleaned from this hearing is that we're in quite a predicament. It's unprecedented, and it's the ramifications are more severe than if we would have just bonded in the first place. As Senator Scavello alluded to, we probably saved money if we would have bonded rather than trying to bond now. But I think we all recognize that we have to come up with a different method of funding transportation. It's as Senator Scavello said again, is ridership is down, the gas tax is down, and I think we have to work really hard in the next year and finding alternate forms of funding for our transportation issues, or this is going to be the norm instead of the exception. So I am hopeful that we come together and we work to solve this problem, because it's not a partisan issue. It's not a geographic issue. It's a statewide issue, and it's something we all have to come together on and convince our other elected officials that it's it's necessary going forward. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, all of our members, all of the testifiers for participating today. The recording of the hearing will be available on the Senate Transportation Committee's GOP website. And that concludes today's hearing, and the Senate Transportation Committee stands in recess at the call of the chair.